We're live. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me and my guest, Keely Severson. Or Keely, do we call you Keely Joe? You never answered me.
Keely or Keely Joe is fine.
Okay. The reason I said that, I asked because Keely and I are going to talk to you today about toxic mold. And we are also going to tell you about something called Clubhouse. If you don't know about it, Keely and I are on Clubhouse, and we're going to be doing some regular conversations. And it's kind of a cool app where it's like listening to a telephone conversation, and you can get involved, you can participate, or you don't have to. But it's a great way. The other day we were on with a couple of, can I say blokes?
Yes.
I don't know if they say that down under, but a couple of guys from Australia, and it's such a great thing. But you have to be invited to get on to or into Clubhouse. Is that right, Keely?
Yes, and it's also only open to iPhone users because it's in beta testing right now.
But it is cool, right?
It's awesome because
It's
you can
really
have
cool.
real-time meetings from anywhere in the world with whoever you want.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so, Keely, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me again, Shemaine.
So you and I had a quite in-depth conversation the other day, and I said, we got to take this a little bit further, girlfriend. We got to go there. And I would love for you to expound on what we were talking about, and also the spiritual connection that we have with toxic mold exposure. Now, some people might listen to what I just said and go, well, that doesn't make sense. I honestly believe that people like you and I have been so affected by toxic mold. It made us sick and almost die. And I want people to hear your story about it. But I do believe personally that either God just keeps nudging me because it keeps happening to me. We keep having homes with water leaks, and I'm like at this point going, all right, God, I'm going to tell everybody about it. So I'm writing a book about it, and I am producing a documentary. Keely, tell us a little bit about your story and why you're here.
Well, today what I'm here to talk about is something that's been hidden for quite a long time. And when you expressed your interest in sharing this story, this was a really big deal because my teacher and mentor, where I have gotten this information, has been begging doctors and researchers to look into hidden facts about toxic mold making people sick since the late 80s. Stachybotrys was present and found in sick buildings when the CDC originally coined the term chronic fatigue syndrome. There was a group of people that were asked to be chronic fatigue syndrome prototypes, and they accepted, thinking that the research would be done. And when those prototypes asked the CDC to look into the ventilation system to see why the people in this one room were getting sick and not recovering, they were ignored, and later that room tested positive for Stachybotrys. What that tells us is that Stachybotrys, presence of toxic mold Stachybotrys, is the clue that nobody looked into when chronic fatigue syndrome was coined, which means we've never done real research on this syndrome to figure out what's causing it because we haven't looked at all the angles. And there do not seem to be any doctors or researchers who want to dive into this and share this story.
And for those people watching, I wrote Stachybotrys. I think I spelled that right. A lot of people who are watching, this might be their first foray into toxic mold discussion. Stachybotrys is one of the deadliest types of mold. And just for those people who don't know about me or Keely, my home that was once featured on MTV Cribs was contaminated with toxic mold between the walls. I never saw anything. I just kept getting sicker and sicker. Toxic mold illness is a slow and deadly killer. 18 years ago, I was diagnosed with having pre-emphysema, and I don't smoke. I've been a group fitness instructor since 1980. And I feel like I'm on a mission from God to educate people and bring awareness to this, because I was just talking with a friend this morning. If you are suffering from anything from fibromyalgia to headaches, migraines, asthma, allergies, ADD, lupus, Keely, what else?
Oh, I mean, you
Keep
covered
going
it,
on.
but I would go so far as to say toxic mold should be suspected for any mental health condition, any autoimmune disease, any neurological condition, and any nerve damage condition. Those are my 4 large overarching areas that flag me to think mold could be involved.
And what the main issue is that you and I discovered, and a lot of other people do. The reason why I'm speaking out about this, it's not like this is what I was a little girl and I always wanted to talk about toxic mold when I grew up. That's not how this was. But people at some point, especially when you deal with, like you said, mental illness or depression or sadness or melancholy feelings or even suicide, you get to the point where people don't believe you. Your family, friends, and even doctors just say, well, you're stressed. Everything these days can be written off as stress related. But when you are exposed to toxic mold, it's exacerbated 100-fold. Every little thing that you had. I used to suffer from migraines. I was hospitalized for them. I was popping medication like M&Ms, and I love M&Ms. Like, it was just going out of style. I should have been the walking poster child for health and fitness, and yet I look like a drug addict. I mean, every week it seemed like I was going to the pharmacist to try yet another drug. And that's not how life should be. If you're at that position in life, Keely and I want to bring you hope and just encourage you to try to find a doctor who specializes in functional medicine or will at least talk about mold. Keely, what can you recommend? You're an acupuncturist.
I'm an herbalist and an acupuncturist. I'm a Chinese medicine healthcare provider, and under that license is acupuncture and herbal medicine. I think that any practitioner that's going to be treating toxic mold patients has to have a very advanced understanding of sick building syndrome, how buildings can make you sick, common problems. But it's also necessary to have an overarching concept of things that make mycotoxins act more aggressive, which is an environmental component. And there's one quote that I always say: there is no way to out-medicate toxic air. So mold avoidance has to be a piece of the treatment. You cannot stay in a house that taints your health and medicate your way out of it.
Right. And even if you do take the medication, and let's say you get out of the house, a lot of people will think, okay, well, now I'm better. Keely, tell everybody why that's not always the case.
Well, one big reason that that's not always the case is Stachybotrys and other toxic molds can suppress your immune system. So your immune system can be so completely tanked once you get out of mold or a water damaged space that has mold growth, and then you encounter a little bit of it in a moldy area or in a moldy home. People can suffer what's called intensification or hypersensitivity, and it basically feels like a full-on mold hit from just a little bit of mold. And that's because your immune system wants to overreact and attack this because it's flagging it as a recurring attack. And that's one big reason it's not that easy. And then a lot of our cases are complicated by other pathogens. We have parasitic involvement. These cases can get really complicated with other pre-existing viruses with toxic mold exposure. And that's actually one of the things that I believe is happening to the long haulers in COVID. I think that you're going to start seeing that the people who don't recover from COVID are people who live in a water damaged space or have other chemical exposure.
And also, what I've been hearing too, and my research is taking me, is that, when people are affected with Lyme disease and they've been in a moldy home, they've been exposed to mold mycotoxins, it makes everything that much worse. And a lot of times doctors are just trying to find, how to treat one symptom. And do you hear that clicking? I hear clicking. I don't know why.
I do, but I don't know where it's coming from.
I don't know. And we've been getting a couple of comments that I'm trying to delete, that there's like people looking for some relationships. This is not the place to look for that. Okay, so back to toxic mold. What are some of the things that you recommend as an herbalist? What can people do besides take medication?
It really depends based on their presentation.
Presentation, by presentation, you mean how they have been affected, how they're showing up.
How they're showing up, how their symptoms are showing up. And also a big one in Chinese medicine is, what does their tongue look like? Because this gives us a lot of information on biofilm internally and what is going on with different organs and how they're functioning. And the one thing that's different about Chinese medicine versus some of the other mold protocols is it's very customized case to case, and it's never a binder and then a probiotic. It's not this like strict protocol where everyone gets the same thing. So that answer varies quite a bit, but I really like herbs that clean mucus out of the kidneys, clean up the lymphatic system, and there's
such as name a couple.
I like Akatillo. I like Chinese medicine formula called San Ren Tong. I like we could really deep dive into that, and I don't ever want people to self-prescribe.
Right. Oregano oil.
That's more of a shoemaker recommendation, or like a naturopathic recommendation. And the reason that works really well for some people is because it's a hot oil, and a lot of people need warming herbs after they've been sick from a cold, damp pathogen. And it's also an antifungal, but that's one that can get a bit iffy with like everyone just using it.
And that's a problem. I'm producing a documentary right now, and my son Rocco in the documentary says, because I've interviewed my son Rocco, my husband, obviously, my doctors, attorneys, my stepson Toby, and Rocco said, when he was growing up, it was like, he went on tour with his dad, my husband, on rock and roll music tour, and then he was going on tour with me to different doctors. And I want to encourage people. I see Sandy Spencer on here, and Deborah and Jack Stevens and Kevin Scholl. Hey, Kevin, I want to encourage people to keep trying to find a doctor that will work with you, and a doctor who will listen to you and your symptoms, and not just prescribe medication after medication, because that only covers the problem. You have to literally detoxify your body. And years ago, gosh, it's been 20 years. I've been doing infrared saunas, vitamin IVs, acupuncture, oxygen, massage, lymphatic massage, something called a Hocket, hyperbaric oxygenated carbonic acid transdermal therapy. Pretty much done it all to try to detoxify my body, because I had 4 different types of mold in my bloodstream. And the problem is, we were talking about this just a minute ago, the problem is too, is that you could leave the house, go to another place, and then get sick again. You might have a couple of good months or even years, and then get sick because you encounter, like you said, sick building syndrome. What is that? Describe that, Keely?
Well, the interesting thing about that is the World Health Organization described the term sick building syndrome in 1974. And it was a term to say there's something in the buildings that is making us sick. All those buildings are water damaged. And so they're just not coming out and saying that this is mold sickness. But the thing that complicates sickness from water damage, and some researchers are doing this right now and getting people confused and chasing their tails, but they're saying things like this. well, there's this bacteria in that wet building, and there's this fungi, and there's this mycotoxin, but these bacteria are really dangerous. This isn't toxic mold exposure. This is toxic soup. There's bacteria. And some of that research is misguided because it's taking this apart and focusing on one part and saying, well, is this the problem? The whole fact that you have a rotting building full of dampness and water damage is the problem, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I see Sandy says here, help me, single parent mold can be a crime. We are not okay and not safe. And this is what you and I were talking about the other day, Keely. I don't know what the next step is. And I would love to start a movement where we can get to insurance companies to provide more mold coverage. Because if you say on your insurance, you call your insurance company and say, hey, I found mold, they're probably not going to do anything. If you have water damage, it's like you've got to be careful about what you say, and you've got to go after and remove the source. And then the other problem is that medical insurance doesn't cover, for the most part, alternative or functional medicine, like what we were just talking about, like acupuncture and herbs. And wouldn't it be great if we went to a doctor, and let's say a doctor, we were talking about this too, Keely, where a doctor would say, well, what is your home life like? What is your day like? Well, I wake up, it's dark, I get in my car, I drive to work, I'm working 12 hours in an office, I come home, I cook, clean, go to bed, and I do it all over again. I get zero sunshine. So the point is, what if a doctor just said, hey, I prescribe 30 minutes of sunshine a day, or, eating more vegetables or exercise or something like that. And they don't do that. We're so far embedded with big pharma that I don't know how to get out of this.
Well, you make some really good points there. And the doctors have their hands tied a little bit because the American Medical Association won't recognize mold-related syndromes. And one of the reasons is there's no validated testing available to us. Whether or not it exists, I don't know. And the other limitation is the symptoms are so diverse that when we start saying it can present like this or it can present like this, because it can really present like anything when you're being poisoned, it makes us sound a little crazy that you could say all these symptoms. And so not having a concise, cute little list of symptoms works against us for the American Medical Association recognizing it. Also, refusing to look into Stachybotrys at ground zero for chronic fatigue syndrome really ensured that they were going to stay focused only on the viral component, and they've only been researching viruses in relation to these chronic illnesses since then. So some of this seems like the mainstream doctors and researchers should have a little bit more interest in the way that our environment can work with our immune system.
Keely, it's almost as if they want us to stay sick. Just saying.
You said
doesn't it seem like that sometimes? Like they're giving us medication, and Tina Marone says, will you not ever be systematic to mold? I mean, I think she meant to say something else, because you'll never know when you'll be exposed. So the problem is, Tina, and so many others who are joining on with us live today, we're streaming live on Facebook and Periscope and also YouTube. So thank you guys. Let me know where you're watching from. I always like to see what cities, states, countries you're watching from, and where, Periscope, Facebook, or YouTube, so we can get this out more. But the problem is, Keely, you and I have talked about this many, many times. I supposedly cured myself of mold using functional medicine, but Tina's right. We can get re-exposed, or worse yet, what typically happens is you get something called multiple chemical sensitivity, where you cannot go into sick buildings. You cannot go into like the malls. I couldn't, after I was getting healthy and I was detoxifying my body. I stayed in a health facility at the Environmental Health Center in Dallas, Texas. I stayed there for a month, and it was so clean. I didn't even go to a mall for a couple of months. And the first time I was able to go out and go shopping, I remember opening that door. And a sporting goods store is sometimes the worst offender because of all the plastic, the rubber. I opened the door and the smells hit me like a brick wall. And so that's what we deal with now. It's not, yes, mold is always there. I mean, we're surrounded by it in Mother Nature, but we're talking about Stachybotrys and a few of the big guys. But Keely, what can you do about multiple chemical sensitivity?
The number one thing you can do is completely avoid mold, because what I believe is happening.
Good luck with that.
Right. But I believe what's happening here is fungi produce mycotoxins that are chemicals that are toxic to our brain and spinal cord and nervous system. Once we have a lot of chemical damage, other chemicals are triggering that same type of chemical damage because we are enduring chemical injury. And I do know of cases of multiple chemical sensitivity subsiding after people have had long-term mold avoidance and their system has been able to heal a little bit. These same people can now be around a little bit of mold and not get taken out like they could when they first started recovering. So if you can live in a space that doesn't have a lot of toxic mold or water damage, you actually, over the years, can kind of build up and have less chemical injury.
Yeah. And we're never going to eliminate mold completely, but that's the big thing. Like, you've got to really eliminate it from, if you're sick from mold, toxic mold, you've got to eliminate it from your life as much as you can for a period of time until you can start to feel healthy again. And it's like taking baby steps, because you cannot eliminate and avoid all chemicals. Like, what happens, one of the things that happens to me and my husband is that, and now my son Rocco, is that if we go to somebody's home, we open the door, either we smell toxic mold or so many chemicals like the even fabric softener. I can smell it. I can walk by somebody in the grocery store and I can smell it on their clothing. And you guys don't realize how much this impedes your health by just surrounding yourself, your body, your home with all these toxins in your air.
Shemaine, I just want to add the other thing that's happening. What you're describing is symptoms of feeling like you're getting a mold hit from another chemical, but it's a chemical injury. This is also happening to people around electronics and EMFs, because there is a component of the nanoparticles that are part of these electronics that do have peer-reviewed research that they're strengthening and amplifying the effects of mycotoxins. So now we also have the added complicated layer of there's an environmental component that's making this behave very ferocious.
Very similarly to how you felt before, and you don't really know what it is.
Right.
So the problem is, like, I remember when I was first getting healthy, I eliminated all potential triggers, cheese, coffee, chocolate, of course, junk food and all that. And then I was like, the human body has an amazing ability to heal. I'm living proof, and so are you, and so are so many others here. And we want to get this word out and encourage people. Don't give up. There will be a day when you can have Fritos again. There will be a day when you can have cheese again. Maybe not as much as you wanted to, and maybe you get other, like you say, hits. Like I had, Ted wanted pizza the other day, and I'm like, I want pizza so bad. I want it so bad. Okay, let's do it. It was like I knew I'd be paying for it days later. It's 3-4 days later, and I'm still paying for it. In other symptoms, in the form of, like, not to get gross or anything, but like I feel bloated and yucky and disgusting. And so it's kind of like you pick and choose your battles. But if you're dealing with immediate toxic mold exposure, you got to get rid of that source. You got to get the heck out of there.
That's true. Shemaine, just to come full circle to your point that you made in the beginning about the spiritual component.
Yes, we forgot to talk about that. Why do we always forget?
One thing that happened to me is I kept hearing the phrase exposing mold, and it was actually annoying me. And I registered the domain name to like make it stop. And then 2 months later, I was actually exposing mold in our rental. Now, the interesting thing about that is I thought that that was the exposing mold. I thought that's why I was hearing it. But Shemaine, after connecting with you, I feel like you might actually be the one person that I can work with to actually truly, meaningfully, and honestly, fully expose mold. And I think it's going to take a tribe on this one. And that's why I was so happy to introduce you to Eric. And I'd be happy to help set up an interview with the original mold warrior, Eric Johnson.
Yes, Eric and I have been emailing back and forth, and I can't wait to talk with him. I think we're going to talk on Friday, but we're going to wrap this up. Keely, you and I could talk about mold forever. Yes. And let's tell everybody about Clubhouse. What is Clubhouse? How do you get it? How can they follow us on Clubhouse? Because we've already done a couple of chats, and you're going to be doing them more often. I'm going to jump in when I can. What is Clubhouse?
Clubhouse is a voice-only app available right now to iPhone users. It's in beta testing. I do have 5 invites to share. If you have an iPhone, you can message me and I will give you an invite. Shemaine, the more you share invites and build your network, the more invites they'll give you to share. We meet there every Thursday and Sunday at 3 p.m. Central, and we deep dive into all different aspects of mold-related topics. Thursday and Sunday at 3 p.m. Central. Thursday and Sunday at 3 p.m. Central. I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to jump in when I can. So if I invite somebody on Clubhouse, then I'll get more like invites. Is that right? Yes. Oh, my baby's going to cry. No worries. The more you build your network, the more invites they offer you. Okay, good to know. All right, well, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Keela, for being here. Your Exposing Mold is helping people. How can people find you? Exposing Mold Facebook page and Exposing Mold on Instagram. All right, guys, have a great day. Make it a great day. I'll see you here again someday soon in the next couple of days, but also follow us on Clubhouse. I'm at Shemaine on Clubhouse. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye, Keely. Thank you. Bye.